Welcome to the New Heights Show on Education. I'm Pamela Clark, founder and director of the New Heights Educational Group, and I'm here with David Smith, the founder of Silicon Valley High School, who has helped us get these podcasts produced and delivered to you.
Yes, Pamela, when we saw the great things that you and your army of volunteers were achieving at New Heights, we wanted to get involved. We're happy to work with you to leverage the internet and make quality education accessible and affordable to everyone, everywhere.
Thank you, David. We appreciate Silicon Valley High School helping us to get these podcasts out to the hundreds of thousands of listeners from all over the world. So I hope you enjoy the show.
In this week's episode, we will discuss education reform on mission.
Hello, everyone. This is Danielle Washington coming to you live from Ms. Buffy Williams' office. We're just sitting around thinking about life and trying to become better people tonight, so check us out. Welcome back. You're on the air with Buffy Williams, and you have been listening to the New Heights Show on Education. We have been discussing the show's purpose on mission.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Buffy Williams, and you're listening to the New Heights Educational Group, the New Heights Show on Education. Tonight's topic is K through 12 grading system. On last week's show, we discussed my intentions for the show and the emerging trend of flipped classrooms. On tonight's episode, we are discussing K through 12 and the grading system. Join in the discussion with us by calling 917-948-7542 or put your comments in the chat or use the hashtag on social media, NHEG, or as always, you can post your comments on Twitter at Buffy_Awaken or on Spreaker, Instagram, or YouTube. Remember, my fellow New Heights host Erica Hansen's show airs on Thursdays at 2 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 1 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. When I looked at my research for the K through 12 grading system, it occurred to me that on yesterday we were all observing Memorial Day. And so I wanted to take a moment to reflect on all the men and women who have made the ultimate sacrifice to protect our freedoms, such as education and the education system here in the U.S. So if you all would just take a moment of pause and reflection of silence with me. Thank you. Tonight's episode, our resources are coming from K-12 Academics and Teach Thought. I know a lot of us have, our own views on the grading system as it currently stands and what our pros and cons are about how the grading system is. Or maybe you haven't even thought about the grading system at all. You just assume that this is the way it is and this is the way that it will always be. But I can distinctly remember an experience for me in high school that, even in elementary school, that kind of stuck with me based on the grading system. So when I was in elementary school, one of the things was I always had poor handwriting. And so my mother would always say, Buffy, why is it that we can't, improve your writing score? And I'm sure you guys know, it was either satisfactory, needs improvement, or unsatisfactory. And so I always received a needs improvement in handwriting. And no matter how hard I tried, every time I opened up that report card, And for those of you out there, the students who don't know what that is, when we were in school, there was an actual paper report card that folded in half that you brought home that had your school's name on the front and whether or not you were, what grade you were currently in, and if you're going to be promoted, it would be on the, I think it was on the front of the card after the year was over. And so when you opened it up, it had your the first half of the year on the left hand of the card and the second half of the year on the right hand of the card, and all of your comments and signatures from your parents and your teachers were on the back of the card. So every time you got the report card, your parents would have to sign it, you would have to take it home, your parents would sign it, and you would bring it back, and your teacher would put comments. And so for whatever reason, with handwriting, I always got unsatisfactory. So I can remember the day where probably towards the end of the year, I don't even know what grade it was in, probably the 4th or 5th grade, finally got a satisfactory, and I practiced so hard on my handwriting. But anybody that knows me today knows I still have an awful handwriting. It's legible to me, of course, but I do have to practice at it still today. So that was one of the things in elementary school that stuck with me as far as the grading system. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the A through F grading system. So in addition to that, in high school, I received, and you guys are not going to believe this because it's going to sound really, really weird, I received an F in PE. And I remember it because it said, we received report cards, you had the letter grade, and then your teacher would put like this hyphen sign, and then the actual numerical grade. So it was a F and a 41 in PE, if you can believe that. And it was because I didn't dress out. Okay, so how do you get an F in PE? You don't dress out. And so in those days, dressing out was like a major part of your grade. If you didn't dress out, everybody dressed in the same uniform, and you had to dress out. And I was a painfully shy person. People would not believe that, but I still am a pretty shy person. And so for me to have to dress out, I don't know, it's just something about it. I just didn't like it. And so you would go to the girls' locker room, and you would dress out in these uniforms, and everybody had on the same uniform. And I was just rebelling against it for whatever reason. And my mother was livid, of course. And I received a 41F in PE. So that was my kind of experience with it. But I think one of the things that kind of stood out with me, because, throughout the U.S., we receive report cards throughout the year, but now it's, of course, a paper version. And the report cards are given out in, pretty much the same intervals they were during that time. But in addition to that, our students have what's called, active monitoring, electronic monitoring of their grades. So every time a teacher puts in a grade for your child, their parents can actually go online and look at what assignments they're actually doing. So when we were in school, if you did poorly last 9 weeks, it would take a whole 9 weeks for your parents to actually figure out that you weren't doing what you were supposed to be doing unless the teacher sent a note home or sent a notification to your parents that said, hey, Johnny or Jill is not doing this particular project. Could you help them with that? But there was no daily monitoring of the grades. And so I'm wondering if that daily monitoring is a healthy thing. You guys can tell me what you think. I'm not quite sure. Of course, I don't have children right now in K through 12. So for me, I'm not sure if that's a healthy thing. And you all may think that that's a productive thing, and I can see where it could be, because then if your child was struggling with something, then you could help them with it before the progress report came out or the actual final grade came out. But when we were in school, we had time to kind of catch up and do better on the next test and the next test. And I can remember us really striving to try to make sure that once the grades came back out for the next 9 weeks, well, of course, I never made an F in PE ever again. But I'm pretty sure I got grounded. And you would have time to kind of make up that grade and do what you needed to do in order to do better in that class. And so I would like to know from the parents out there, do they feel like this electronic monitoring of grades is a better way to kind of keep track of their students' progress in school? But the other thing is that the grading system in the U.S. is pretty common. It does differ from school to school. So you have some schools that the standard is A through F. But then there are schools like in Texas and Virginia that if you get a D in a class, which means from 70 to 60, that is considered a failing grade. But in Hawaii, you could receive a D and it could be a passing grade. And that's the same thing here in Alabama. And so, well, in most schools in Alabama. So, also in Hawaii, you could have a D and it could be considered a failing grade in a particular class. So it kind of depends on the class you're in Hawaii. But then in other states, it may vary on the scale of 0 to 100 as to whether or not that student is actually passing within the class. But we know that grades, they impact our students greatly because it determines so many things. So your GPA will ultimately determine if your child is ending up going to a four-year institution. It factors into what school or institution they decide to go into based on how high their GPA is and also what kind of activities they participated in. So the grading system has a big impact. And so one of the things we're going to look at tonight is the differing or alternative ways of grading in education. And so I want to know from your perspective, what does that really mean for you? Because I can remember students are pretty much defined by what their grades are. You hear comments like, what can I do to get an A on this project? Or what can I do to, this student is usually a C student, or this student has generally gotten A's and B's in my classroom. And so students are kind of defined by what type of grades they have, whether that's a numerical grade or whether that's a letter grade. And so we know that these things also determine whether or not our students qualify to play in sports, get into college, or whether that child deems themselves as being smart or not being smart based on this letter grading system. So what I'm proposing is, are there other alternatives out there for our listeners to consider as to some things we may need to be thinking about within the education system and how we grade our students? And so we're talking today about the grading system in K through 12. And so we hope that you will join us after the break. We'll be back in a moment.
Right now, you might be struggling through your classes or even failing them. You might be worried that you may not finish high school. There might have even been a thought that you may not be smart enough. Well, the New Heights Educational Group begs to differ. We not only think you are smart enough, but with our help, you will complete your high school diploma. The New Heights Educational Group strives to improve your academic success through its tutoring services. To learn more, please visit newheightseducation.org and contact us.